Rejected mail-order bride. Thought no one wanted her until the giant mountain man grabbed her hand. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by the post-rider who barely glanced at Abigail as he dropped the envelope onto the counter of Murphy's trading post. She knew what it contained before her trembling fingers broke the wax seal. Another rejection, the 7th in 4 months. Miss Thompson, while your correspondence was most pleasant, I regret to inform you that I have found a more suitable match. I wish you well in your future endeavors. Abigail folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket alongside the others. Each rejection was worded differently, but the message remained the same. She wasn't suitable, she wasn't desired, she wasn't enough. The year was 1867, and the small mountain town of Pine Ridge huddled at the base of the Sierra Nevada like a collection of forgotten toys scattered by a careless child. Log cabins lined the muddy main street, their windows glowing amber in the perpetual twilight created by towering pines. The town existed because of the river, a wild, rushing thing that brought gold seekers, trappers, and dreamers to this remote corner of the frontier. Abigail had come to Pine Ridge 3 years earlier with her uncle, a merchant who'd promised her a fresh start after her parents died of fever. That fresh start had turned into long days behind the counter, measuring flour and wrapping packages while the townspeople whispered behind their hands. She'd heard the words they thought she couldn't hear. Such a shame about her figure. No man wants a burden. At 23, Abigail had watched every eligible woman in Pine Ridge find a husband. Sarah Mitchell had married the blacksmith. Caroline Webb had wed the mine foreman. Even young Emma Sullivan, barely 17, had accepted a proposal from the new school teacher. But Abigail remained behind the counter, measuring and wrapping, invisible except when she served customers or when the cruel boys mocked her on her way home. The mail-order bride advertisements had seemed like salvation. Somewhere in the vast territories, there had to be a man who valued kindness over appearance, who needed a partner rather than an ornament. She'd poured her heart into those letters, describing her love of books, her skill with accounts, her knowledge of herbs and healing. She'd been honest about everything except her appearance, hoping that her words would win a heart before her body could lose one. 7 letters, 7 rejections. Another one? Her uncle's voice startled her from her thoughts. Marcus Thompson stood in the doorway to the back room, his expression somewhere between pity and exasperation. Abigail, perhaps it's time to accept that marriage isn't in your future. You're needed here, after all. The store does well enough. Needed as free labor, Abigail thought but didn't say. She nodded instead, swallowing the lump in her throat. Yes, Uncle Marcus, I'll get back to work. That night, Abigail sat in her small room above the store and burned the letters. She watched the paper curl and blacken, carrying her dreams up the chimney in wisps of gray smoke. No more letters, no more hope. She would learn to be content with books and solitude, with the mountains visible from her window and the stars that wheeled overhead in patterns older than loneliness. 3 weeks later, Jedediah Stone came down from the high country. He appeared on a Wednesday afternoon, leading a mule laden with pelts, and walking with the steady, unhurried gait of a man who measured distances in days rather than hours. He was massive, well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block the sun and hands that could have wrapped around a bear's throat. His beard reached his chest, dark brown shot through with gray, and his eyes were the pale blue of glacier ice. The townspeople gave him a wide berth. Jed Stone was a legend in Pine Ridge, though few could claim to know him. He lived somewhere high in the mountains, appearing twice yearly to trade furs for supplies before vanishing back into the wilderness. Some said he'd been a soldier in the war. Others whispered that he'd killed a man and fled justice. The children dared each other to approach him, but none ever did. Abigail was reorganizing the fabric section when Jed entered the store. The floorboards groaned under his weight, and the doorframe seemed suddenly too small. She glanced up, then quickly away, focusing on the bolts of calico as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Need supplies," Jed rumbled. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together, rough from disuse. "Of course, Mr. Stone." Her uncle appeared immediately, rubbing his hands together in that obsequious way he reserved for profitable customers. "What can we provide for you today?" While they conducted business, Abigail continued her work, acutely aware of the mountain man's presence. She could feel him taking up space, drawing the air toward him like a lodestone. When Marcus called her over to help tally the order, she approached with her eyes downcast, calling out items while her uncle noted them in his ledger. Flour, 20 pounds. Coffee, 5 pounds. Salt, 10 pounds. You read well. Jed's observation startled her mid-count. Yes, my mother taught me. The words came out barely above a whisper. Those glacier blue eyes studied her for a long moment. Abigail waited for the judgment, the dismissal, the look of faint disgust she'd learned to recognize. Instead, Jed simply nodded and turned back to Marcus. "Need someone to help load the mule, pay extra?" "Abigail can help," Marcus volunteered before she could protest. "Won't charge extra. She's family." Of course he won't charge, Abigail thought bitterly. Why would he pass up free labor? She followed Jed outside, where his mule waited with the patience of the long-suffering. The afternoon sun slanted through the pines, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Jed loaded the heavy sacks with ease, but he handed Abigail the lighter parcels, treating her like a partner rather than a servant. They worked in silence until Billy Hodges and his friends appeared. Billy was the son of the mine owner, a young man with too much money and too little sense. He'd made a habit of tormenting Abigail since she'd arrived in Pine Ridge. "Well, well," Billy drawled, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Looks like old Jed's found himself a girlfriend. Tell me, Stone, you planning to use her for a pack animal? She's certainly built for it." His friends erupted in laughter. Abigail froze, heat flooding her face. This wasn't the first time Billy had mocked her publicly, and she'd learned that responding only encouraged him. Better to endure in silence and escape at the first opportunity. But Jed didn't know the rules of her survival. The mountain man turned slowly, deliberately, like a mountain deciding to shift its weight. He didn't say a word. He simply walked toward Billy Hodges with those slow, measured steps that ate up distance despite their unhurried pace. Billy's laughter died. His friends took a step back. Jed stopped 3 feet from Billy, towering over the younger man like a bear over a cub. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Finally Jed spoke, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet street. "I've tracked wounded grizzlies through blizzards, fought off wolverines over my winter stores, spent 3 days trapped under a deadfall with a broken leg, and dug myself out, but I've never, in all my years, seen a creature as pathetic as a man who finds courage only in mocking someone gentler than himself. Billy's face went white, then red. You were just leaving. Jed's tone allowed no argument. Now, Billy and his friends scattered like quail before a wolf. Jed turned back to Abigail, who stood frozen by the mule, her heart hammering against her ribs. The mountain man studied her for a moment, then extended his hand, a massive, calloused hand that had survived countless winters and countless dangers. "You all right, miss?" Abigail stared at that offered hand. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever stepped between her and cruelty. She placed her smaller hand in his, feeling calluses and warmth and something else, something that felt almost like safety. "Thank you," she whispered. Jed nodded once, then released her hand and finished loading his mule. Before he left, he paused. "You rid well," he repeated, "and you work careful. Those are good qualities." Then he was gone, walking back toward the mountains with his loaded mule, leaving Abigail standing in the street with her hand still tingling where he'd touched it. Jed didn't return for 2 months. Winter crept down from the high peaks, painting the world white and driving most people indoors. Abigail spent her days in the warm store, but her nights were occupied with memories of that brief encounter, the way Jed had stood between her and mockery, the genuine respect in his eyes when he'd spoken to her. She told herself not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope had led to 7 rejections and countless small humiliations. But hope, like winter grass, grew in the most unlikely places. When Jed appeared again in late November, the first snow had already fallen. Abigail was sweeping the store's front porch when she saw him coming down the main street, leading a different mule this time. Her heart performed a complicated maneuver in her chest. "Miss Thompson?" He touched his hat brim, a gesture of respect that made her breath catch. "Mr. Stone, welcome back to Pine Ridge." "Jed," he corrected. "Just Jed. Mr. Stone was my father." "Then you must call me Abigail." Something that might have been a smile moved beneath his beard. "Abigail. It's a good name. Strong." They stood there in the cold morning air, breath misting between them, until her uncle appeared and swept Jed inside to discuss business. But this time, when Jed needed help loading supplies, he asked for Abigail specifically. "Your uncle mentioned you're good with accounts," Jed said as they worked. "I need someone to look over my trading records, make sure the buyers down in Sacramento aren't cheating me. Would you be willing?" It was such a simple request, but it felt like being handed the world. "I'd be happy to help. I'll pay, of course, not charity." "I wouldn't think it was," Abigail said softly. "You're not the charitable type." Jed paused in his loading. "What type am I, then?" She considered the question seriously. "The honest type, the fair type, the type who says what he means and does what he says." "And you can tell all that from 2 short meetings?" "I'm good at reading things," Abigail replied, "not just books." This time the smile was definite. "Then we'll do well together." Over the next 3 months, an unusual routine developed. Every 2 weeks, Jed would appear in Pine Ridge with pelts to trade or questions about his accounts. Abigail discovered that despite his fearsome appearance, Jed was methodical and fair in his business dealings. But he was also being systematically cheated by the fur buyers in Sacramento, who relied on his isolation and presumed ignorance to skim profits. "Look here," Abigail explained one afternoon, her finger tracing a column of numbers in Jed's worn ledger. They sat at a corner table in the trading post, papers spread between them. "They're buying your beaver pelts at winter prices even in summer, when the quality commands premium rates. You're losing at least 30% of your profit." Jed leaned forward to study the figures. He smelled like pine needles and wood smoke, clean and wild. "Can you write me a letter? Something that would make them take notice without causing a fight?" "I can do better than that. I can create a price sheet for you, showing fair market rates for each season and each quality of pelt. Bring it with you next time. Knowledge is armor in business." "You're too smart to be measuring flour in a backwater trading post." The observation stung because it was true. Intelligence doesn't matter much when you're a woman. Matters even less when you look like me. Jed set down his pencil and fixed her with those pale blue eyes. Anyone who judges a person's worth by their appearance is too stupid to deserve the judgment. My mother used to say that a person's true measure is taken in darkness when no one can see them but God. How do they act when appearance doesn't matter? That's who they really are. Abigail felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them away furiously. "Your mother sounds wise." She was. Jed's voice softened. "Lost her when I was 17. Fever took her, same as it took my father and baby sister. That's when I went to the mountains. Couldn't stay in a house full of ghosts." "I'm sorry." Abigail understood loss. She understood the kind of loneliness that grew not from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who didn't see you. "Don't be sorry. The mountains gave me something to do with my grief, gave me purpose." He paused, studying her face. "What gives you purpose, Abigail?" No one had ever asked her that before. She thought about it carefully, wanting to give him the truth. "Books, numbers, the way things fit together in patterns if you look closely enough, and—" She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "And being useful, helping, mattering to someone, even in small ways." "Not small," Jed said firmly. "You've saved me hundreds of dollars with your accounting. You matter plenty." The warmth in her chest lasted for days. By early spring, their arrangement had evolved beyond simple business. Jed began bringing Abigail things from his mountain treks, interesting stones, pressed flowers, a perfect bird's nest he'd found abandoned in a tree. In return, she shared books from her small collection, which Jed devoured with surprising enthusiasm. "Never had much schooling," he admitted one afternoon, "but my mother taught me to read before she died. Always meant to read more, but books are scarce in the high country." "You can borrow any of mine," Abigail offered. "I have almost 20 volumes." "20?" Jed looked genuinely impressed. "That's a library." Their friendship scandalized Pine Ridge. People whispered about the strange mountain man and the unmarriageable girl, speculating about what they could possibly discuss during their long afternoons together. Her uncle disapproved but couldn't forbid the relationship. Jed's business was too valuable, and besides, Marcus was secretly relieved that someone else was occupying Abigail's time. "What do they say about us?" Jed asked one day, nodding toward a group of townswomen who quickly looked away when he glanced at them. "That you're either very desperate or very strange," Abigail replied honestly. "That I've somehow bewitched you. That we're engaged in all sorts of improper behavior." "Are we?" She looked up sharply, but Jed's expression was serious. "Are we what?" "Engaged in improper behavior. Jed, we read books and discuss accounting, were possibly the most boring friends in the entire territory. Friends, he tested the word. Yes, I suppose that's what we are. Something in his tone made her heart skip, but Abigail pushed the feeling down. She'd learned not to hope for more than friendship. Friendship was already more than she'd ever expected. In late April, Jed appeared at the trading post with an unusual proposal. I'm going up to my summer camp tomorrow. The high meadows will be in bloom. Thought you might like to see them. Abigail's hand stilled over the inventory she was checking. Go into the mountains? With you? Not proper, I know, but I thought... He paused, running a hand through his beard in a gesture she'd learned meant he was uncomfortable. Thought you might enjoy the adventure? You're always stuck in this store. Figured you deserved to see something beautiful. It was wildly inappropriate. Unmarried women didn't venture into the wilderness alone with men, especially men like Jed Stone. If she went, her reputation, already tattered, would be destroyed completely. But what reputation did she have to lose? And when had she last done something just because it made her happy? I'd need to be back by evening, she said slowly. My uncle would notice if I were gone overnight. Jed's face lit up with something that looked like joy. We'll leave at dawn. I'll have you back before supper. They left as the sun was painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Jed had brought a gentle mare for Abigail, one of 3 horses he kept stabled at the edge of town. The trail wound up into the foothills, following paths known only to hunters and trappers. Abigail had never been so far from town. As they climbed higher, the world opened around them in ways she'd never imagined. The valley spread below like a quilt, the river threading through it like silver ribbon. Above them, snow-capped peaks pierced the sky, ancient and eternal. This is... She couldn't find words big enough. This is where I come when I need to remember I'm small, Jed said quietly. The mountains don't care about human troubles. They were here before us. They'll be here after. Something peaceful about that. They rode for 3 hours, stopping occasionally to rest the horses or point out deer, eagles, a black bear ambling through the underbrush at a safe distance. Jed told her the names of plants, showed her how to read animal tracks, explained the intricate web of life that existed above the tree line. Finally, they crested a ridge, and the summer meadow spread before them. It was a riot of wildflowers, purple lupines, yellow buttercups, white daisies, and a dozen other varieties Abigail couldn't name. The meadow stretched for acres, bordered by dark pines and gray granite, with a small stream running through its center. The air smelled like honey and growing things, and butterflies danced through the blooms like flying jewels. "Oh, Jed," Abigail breathed. "It's perfect. Thought you'd like it." He dismounted and helped her down from her horse, his hand steady at her waist. They left the horses to graze and walked into the meadow. For the first time in years, Abigail felt free. She walked through the flowers, touching their petals, breathing in their scent. Jed followed at a distance, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. They ate lunch by the stream, bread and cheese and dried apples that Jed had brought. The water sang over smooth stones, and overhead hawks circled in lazy spirals. "Can I ask you something?" Abigail ventured. "Why do you live alone?" Jed was quiet for a long moment. "After my family died, I couldn't stand to be around people. Everyone reminded me of what I'd lost. The mountains were different. They asked nothing, offered everything. I could grieve without having to explain myself. And now, he picked up a stone and skipped it across the stream. Now, it's habit. I'm not sure I know how to be any other way. Abigail understood that too. She'd built her own walls, stone by stone, rejection by rejection. Do you ever get lonely? Every day. He looked at her directly. Less so since I met you. Her heart did that complicated maneuver again. Jed, I know what people think, he said quickly. That I'm an oddity. That you're... He paused, choosing words carefully. That you're not what most men want. But Abigail, I've never cared what most men want. I've spent my life in places where appearance means nothing, where all that matters is competence and character. You have both in abundance. You're saying this because I help with your accounts. I'm saying this because it's true. He moved closer, his eyes intense. You're clever and kind and brave. You face small cruelties every day and still find reasons to smile. You see beauty in numbers and patterns. You rid my ledgers like poetry. He stopped, struggling with emotion. You're the finest person I've ever known. Tears spilled down Abigail's cheeks. I'm the mail-order bride that nobody wanted. I'm the girl people mock in the street. You're the woman who makes me want to come down from my mountain, Jed interrupted. You're the reason I've learned to like Pine Ridge. You're the person I think about when I'm alone in my cabin, wondering if there's any point to surviving another winter. He took her hands in his, and his touch was gentle despite his size. I'm not good with words. I'm not civilized. I live in the wilderness, and I'll probably die there. But if you'd even think about... He stopped, started again. Abigail Thompson, would you do me the extraordinary honor of marrying me? The world seemed to stop. The stream paused mid-babble. The butterflies hung suspended in the air. Abigail stared at this massive, kind man who'd somehow seen past every barrier she'd constructed and found something worth treasuring. Why? She whispered. Why me? Because when I'm with you, I'm not alone, because you make me laugh, because you're strong in ways I'm not, because... His voice dropped to a whisper. Because I love you, Abigail. Loved you since that first day when you called out supplies with your eyes down, trying so hard to be invisible. I wanted to tell you that you're the most visible thing in any room, the brightest star in any sky. She was crying openly now. I love you too, she said through her tears. I've loved you since you took my hand outside the trading post, since you showed me that chivalry isn't dead, just rare. Jed pulled her close and Abigail buried her face in his chest. He smelled like pine and safety and home. Is that a yes? He asked, voice rumbling beneath her ear. Yes, she laughed through her tears. Yes, Jed Stone, I'll marry you. Their happiness lasted exactly 6 days. Abigail wore Jed's proposal like armor against the world. When her uncle exploded in fury, "A mountain hermit? Are you insane?" she simply smiled and continued packing her belongings. When the townswomen clucked their tongues and predicted disaster, she thanked them for their concern and went about her business. Jed made arrangements to build them a cabin at the forest's edge, close enough to town for Abigail to maintain friendships, far enough for him to breathe. He was happier than anyone had seen him in decades, smiling more in a week than in the previous 10 years combined. But evil doesn't sleep, even in small mountain towns. Billy Hodges had neither forgotten nor forgiven his public humiliation. The mine owner's son had spent months nursing his wounded pride, waiting for the right moment for revenge. When he heard about Jed and Abigail's engagement, he saw his opportunity. On a Friday afternoon, while Jed was in Sacramento arranging for their marriage license and trading his winter pelts, Billy and 3 of his friends cornered Abigail on her walk home from the trading post. They'd been drinking, which made them bold and stupid. "Well, well," Billy sneered, blocking her path, "if it isn't the mountain man's bride, tell me, how much did Stone pay you to agree to marry him? Must have been a fortune." Abigail tried to step around him, but his friends formed a circle. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The street was empty. Everyone was at the church social on the other side of town. "Please let me pass." "Not until you admit the truth." Billy's breath reeked of whiskey. "You're marrying him for his money. Everyone knows Stone has a fortune saved up from decades of trapping. You saw an opportunity, and—" "I'm marrying him because I love him," Abigail interrupted, finding courage from somewhere deep inside. "Because he's a better man than you'll ever be. Now move!" Billy's face flushed with rage. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging into her flesh. "You think you're better than us now? You think—" What happened next occurred in a blur. Billy shoved her hard. Abigail stumbled backward, lost her balance, and fell. Her head struck the edge of a water trough with a sickening crack. The world went dark. When she woke, she was in Dr. Wilson's office, lying on an examination table. Her head throbbed, and when she tried to sit up, nausea swept through her. "Easy now," Dr. Wilson said, pressing her gently back down. "You've had a nasty knock to the head." "What? How did I—" "Billy Hodges and his friends brought you here, said you slipped and fell." The doctor's expression was carefully neutral. "That true?" Abigail opened her mouth to tell the truth, but then she saw her uncle standing in the corner, his face twisted with rage, not at Billy, but at her. "Abigail has always been clumsy," Marcus said coldly. "I'm sure it was an accident." She understood immediately. Billy's father owned the mine, which employed half the town. Billy's father was on the town council. Billy's father could destroy Marcus Thompson's business with a word. So the story would be that she fell, and she would be blamed for her own injury. "I slipped," she heard herself say. "It was an accident." Dr. Wilson didn't look like he believed her, but he nodded. "You'll need to rest for several days. The swelling should go down, but you'll have some impressive bruises." Impressive bruises turned out to be an understatement. By the time Jed returned to Pine Ridge 2 days later, Abigail's face was a canvas of purple and yellow, one eye swollen nearly shut. She'd refused to leave her room, claiming illness. But Jed Stone wasn't easily fooled. He appeared at her window after dark, climbing the tree outside her room like a bear scaling a cliff. Abigail startled when she saw his face pressed against the glass, but she opened the window quickly. "What are you doing? You'll fall." Then he saw her face. The transformation was terrible to witness. Jed's expression went from concern to fury in an instant. His hand shook as he climbed through the window, and when he touched her cheek, so gently as if she were made of spider silk, his voice was deadly quiet. "Who did this?" "I fell—" "Don't lie to me." His eyes blazed. "I've seen injuries, Abigail. I know the difference between a fall and violence. Who did this?" She told him everything, watched as his fury grew into something cold and dangerous. When she finished, he was trembling with the effort of controlling himself. "I'll kill him," he said simply. "I'll go to the Hodges house right now and I'll—" "No." Abigail grabbed his arm. "Jed, no. His father practically owns this town. They'll hang you. They'll say you were a violent madman who—" "I don't care. I care." She was crying now, tears streaming down her bruised face. "I care, Jed. I just found you. I just found happiness. Don't leave me to avenge me. Stay. Please stay." The rage slowly drained from his face, replaced by anguish. He pulled her close so carefully and held her while she sobbed against his chest. "I won't kill him," he finally said, "but we're leaving. Tonight. We'll go to my cabin in the mountains, get married in Sacramento, never come back to this poisonous place." "My things?" "We'll buy new things. I have money saved, more than your uncle probably told you. We'll—" A knock at the door interrupted him. Marcus's voice came through the wood. "Abigail, are you awake? I need to speak with you." Jed looked at the door, then at the window. Abigail made a decision. "Go," she whispered. "Wait at the edge of town. I'll pack quickly and meet you in an hour." "I don't want to leave you." "1 hour, I promise." Reluctantly, Jed climbed back out the window and disappeared into the darkness. Abigail quickly smoothed her hair and opened her door. Her uncle's expression was grave. "I've been thinking about your situation with Mr. Stone." "It's not a situation. We're engaged." "About that." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I've received a visit from Mr. Hodges, Sr. He's concerned about the, accusations flying around about his son." "Accusations? I haven't accused anyone of anything." "No, but people are talking. And Mr. Hodges feels that perhaps it would be best if you reconsidered your engagement. He's willing to make a generous contribution to the store if you agree to end things with Stone and leave Pine Ridge quietly." Abigail stared at her uncle, understanding dawning with cold clarity. "He's paying you. Billy nearly kills me, and his father is paying you to make me disappear." "Don't be dramatic. You slipped and fell, but Mr. Hodges thinks a fresh start might be good for everyone. He's offering enough money to—" "Enough!" Abigail's voice was steel. "I'm leaving tonight with Jed. You can take Mr. Hodges's blood money or not, I don't care, but I'm done with Pine Ridge, done with you, done with people who measure worth in dollars and pounds." She grabbed her carpet bag and began throwing in her few possessions, books, her mother's locket, her best dress. Marcus sputtered protests, but Abigail ignored him. Within 10 minutes, she was walking down the stairs and out the door, leaving behind 3 years of misery. Jed was waiting where he'd promised, holding the reins of 2 horses. His face, when he saw her, was pure relief. He helped her mount, then swung into his own saddle. "Ready?" he asked. Abigail looked back at Pine Ridge one last time. The town huddled in the darkness, lights glowing in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. Somewhere in one of those houses, Billy Hodges slept peacefully, unpunished. Somewhere else, her uncle was counting Mr. Hodges's money. "More than ready," she said. "Let's go home." They rode through the night, up into the mountains where the air grew thin and cold and clean. As dawn broke over the peaks, painting the world in gold and rose, Abigail felt the weight of Pine Ridge falling away with each mile. Jed's cabin was everything Abigail had imagined and nothing she'd expected. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, built from hand-hewn logs and chinked with moss. A stone chimney rose from one end, and a covered porch wrapped around the front. Behind the cabin, the forest climbed steeply toward the ridgeline, and in front, a meadow sloped down toward a crystalline stream. "It's not fancy," Jed said as he helped her dismount, "but it's solid. Warm in winter, cool in summer, good well, root cellar for food storage." "It's perfect," Abigail said honestly. After the cramped room above her uncle's store, the cabin felt like a palace. Inside, she found a single large room with a sleeping loft above. The furniture was rough but well made: a table, 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, shelves lined with trapping supplies, and a few precious books. Everything was meticulously organized, speaking to the orderly mind of someone who lived alone and depended on efficiency. "I know it's not much for a woman. Jed Stone, if you apologize one more time for your beautiful home, I'm going to become very cross." Abigail set down her carpetbag and turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "This is wonderful. It's ours. That's all that matters." They spent the next weeks making the cabin truly theirs. Jed built Abigail a desk where she could keep accounts and write letters. She sewed curtains from fabric he'd bought on their trip through Sacramento, where they'd married in a small ceremony with 2 strangers as witnesses. Together, they expanded the garden, added chickens to the small barn, and made plans for the future. Life on the mountain was hard but satisfying. Abigail learned to shoot, clean game, preserve food for winter, and read weather patterns in the clouds. Jed learned to share his space, to talk through problems instead of brooding alone, to laugh more and worry less. They were happy, but Billy Hodges wasn't finished with them. Word spread slowly in the mountains, traveling by trappers and traders, but eventually news reached them. Billy Hodges had convinced his father that Jed Stone had kidnapped Abigail Thompson. He'd gotten the sheriff involved. A posse was being formed to rescue Abigail and bring Jed to justice. "It's all lies," Abigail said furiously when a friendly trapper brought them the news. "I left of my own free will. I married Jed legally. They can't—" "They can do whatever they want if they have enough guns," Jed said grimly. He stood at the window, looking down the mountain trail. "I won't let them take you, Abigail. I'll fight if I have to." "You can't fight a whole posse. They'll kill you." "Then we run, head deeper into the mountains, find a place they'll never—" "No." Abigail's voice was firm. "I'm done running. I'm done letting Billy Hodges dictate my life. We're going to go to Pine Ridge and tell the truth, all of it, in front of everyone. They won't listen. Maybe not. But I'm tired of being silent while cruel people write the story. Let them hear my voice for once." Jed studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Together, then. We do this together." They arrived in Pine Ridge on a Saturday when the whole town gathered for the market day. Abigail, still bruised but healing, stood in the center of the main street with Jed at her side. Her voice carried in the mountain air as she told her story. The mail order rejections, Billy's assault, her uncle's complicity, their lawful marriage. "I'm nobody's victim," she declared, looking directly at Billy Hodges, who stood on the edge of the crowd looking pale. "I chose Jed Stone because he's a good man. I chose to leave because I was tired of being treated like less than human, and I'll choose to press charges against Billy Hodges for assault unless he admits, here and now, what he did." The crowd murmured. Billy looked at his father, who looked at the sheriff. The power structure of Pine Ridge wavered on a knife's edge. Then Dr. Wilson stepped forward. "I examined Miss Thompson, Mrs. Stone now, after her accident. Her injuries were consistent with assault, not a fall. I said nothing because I was afraid, but I'm not afraid anymore." One by one, others came forward. A shopkeeper who'd seen Billy and his friends follow Abigail that day. A miner who'd overheard Billy bragging about teaching that fat cow a lesson. Even one of Billy's own friends, his conscience finally pricking him, admitted the truth. Billy Hodges was arrested that afternoon. His father's influence bought him a light sentence, 6 months in the territorial jail and a fine, but it was justice nonetheless. More importantly, the truth was known. The cabin had grown. A second room for children, 2 so far, with a third on the way, a proper barn, an expanded garden, and a small schoolhouse that Abigail ran 3 days a week for the children of trappers and miners who lived in the high country. Pine Ridge had changed, too. Marcus Thompson had sold his store and moved to Sacramento, unable to face his niece after his betrayal. New people had come, bringing new attitudes. The Stones were respected now. Jed for his knowledge of the mountains and fair trading practices, Abigail for her teaching and community building. On a crisp autumn evening, Abigail sat on their porch with Jed, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. Their children played in the meadow, chasing fireflies and laughter. The chickens roosted in the barn. Somewhere in the forest, an owl began its evening song. "Do you ever regret it?" Jed asked, pulling her close. "Giving up the possibility of civilization, coming to live on a mountain with a half-wild husband?" Abigail thought about the mail-order bride who'd believed herself unworthy of love. She thought about the girl who'd measured her worth by others' judgments. She thought about all the pain that had led her to this porch, this man, this life. "Not for a single second," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. In the gathering darkness, the mountain stood eternal and indifferent. But in the warm circle of light from their cabin, 2 people who'd been rejected by the world had found acceptance in each other. They'd built something stronger than stone, deeper than any valley, higher than any peak. They'd built love, and in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The giant mountain man held his wife's hand, and she held his back, and they watched the stars wheel overhead in patterns older than loneliness, newer than hope, eternal as the mountains themselves.